All right, so the Vegas Golden Knights have fired Bruce Cassidy, their coach who has won the cup with them just a few years ago, replaced him with John Tortorella with 9 games left heading into the playoffs. You don't see this too often. Let's dive into it. I got Friedman's reaction. I got Jordan Schmaltzy's reaction. I got Jay Fresh's reaction. I got some stats to run by of was this deserved? Because, they have a great team. They weren't playing in the standings, they weren't looking like they were playing to expectation, but we'll find out how they were really playing.
What do you know
Start with
about this
Frege.
timeline and really the decision to make this change with just 8 games to go in Vegas this season?
Erica, number one, I have a feeling that as I was watching the Golden Knights over the past couple of weeks, I was beginning to wonder, could this actually happen? Bruce Cassidy is a heck of a coach, as you talked about in the
Mm-hmm.
statement there. He's
Mm-hmm.
won the Stanley Cup. He took Boston to a Stanley Cup final, but he is a demanding, hard guy. And I do think that in both Boston and Vegas, it got to situations where maybe it was time. But the one
They ran its
extenuating
course.
circumstance I really believe here is that this year Vegas has had some of the worst goaltending in the league. I mean, you just look at that goal that just went by there. It's
Terrible
like been a
goaltending.
it's been a season long of that. They have one of the worst save percentages. And even since Cassidy won the Stanley Cup, his winning percentage is still around 60%. So I think that
Still
a
really
lot of the
good, but
challenges that Vegas has had this year, it's not just Cassidy. It's also that their goaltending has been among the worst in the league.
bang
I
on
have
Frege.
reported this before, and I'll say it again. I
Yep.
think last year in the playoffs, when they were losing that series to Edmonton, I heard there were some really tough meetings between Cassidy and the players. And I think there was some talk last year at the end of the season, would they make a change? But the
That
manager, Kelly
surprised me.
McCrimmon, really backed his head coach. But I do think the relationship between Cassidy and the players, as great a coach as he is, and kind of frayed in the middle of that Edmonton series.
Interesting that, even last year they might have had some tension towards the end of the year. It's hard to tell when you're not in the room, but we get to Jordan Schmaltz. He says very similar sort of point of view here.
I just thought Vegas, you know what? They look lethargic. They look slow. They weren't playing north. They just looked very disconnected. And for a team that, theoretically and historically has been a pesky team. I mean, you dated all the way back to the Misfits, right? Just a band of brothers that played hard. They played north-south. They were in your
That
face.
was
They
their identity.
forechecked hard. They cleared the front of the paint. And even guys like Braid McNabb, who shut down one side of the ice just because their will to instill physicality on the opposition.
So he's seen lack of
I didn't
physicality.
see any of that. I saw a team that just looked like they had been tuned out, like a team that was just on autopilot, like a team that,
The messaging.
you know what, something wasn't registering with them. The message,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was coming from the coaching staff, whether it was coming internally throughout the group, it just looked like a team that needed a wake-up call. And a
Interesting.
GM told me a long time ago, folks, it's hard to fire every single player. And I just think Kelly McCrimmon got to a point where you lose 6 or 7 in a row. You're this deep into the season. It's not necessarily the
Mm-hmm.
panic button, but what do? The personnel we have to move forward to in the playoffs with is what we got.
This
These
is
are
their
the
team.
cards we've been dealt. And what is the easiest move right now to get a little bit of a jolt from your lineup? Well, that's right now. That's the coach.
It's always easier to fire the coach than to trade 20 players off a team. This is their team they're rolling with. They're trying to go for the hot coach bump. But here's what we got from Jay Fresh, the number one analytics guy, in my view, in the game. Since the Olympic break, Vegas ranks third in 5v5 expected goal share, shot share, and shot attempt share. They've allowed the fewest shots per 60 and the third fewest expected goals against. They're last in shooting percentage, 6.8%. Second last in save percentage, 86.9%. And last in PDO, 93.7%. Pretty much a luck stat. So they're getting unlucky for finishing, not being able to score their chances, unlucky for saving. Goalies aren't bailing them out, let alone doing their own damage here. He thinks this is probably one of the most PDO panic coaching change in history, where they're just on a terrible lucky spell, and they're making an impulse move right before the playoffs, but can also benefit the team. You can go on crazy coach bumps and take off. Now let's look at their stats here. So in the last 25 games, you see here, this is their graph, their last 25 games. Their expected goal share at 5-on-5, it's been positive. There's been only a few games where they've been really outscored or outchanced at 5-on-5. You know, they're dominating a lot of games, even when they're losing. And you look at their goals saved above expected, the best goalie stat, barely at all any help from their goalies. Like, they're almost always getting costed from their goalies consistently. And at best, they get just average. They don't have any games where they're getting stolen for their goaltending. No backup. If the team's not massively outplaying them, they're not winning. So, you know, it comes down to that old saying, you show me a good coach, I'll show you a good goalie. He gets blamed for the goalie's numbers here because the team's actually playing pretty well. You look at the entire season, not just the last 25 games, chances 4%. Team's 8th, 51.8% chances for. Let's look at shots for. 4th, 54%. You know, up there with the Sens, sort of the same predicament as the Sens, outplaying every game, but the goaltending is just letting them down. The goals 4%. You see the big difference here? They're letting in more goals than they score because of the goaltending. They expected goals 4%. They're 5th. They're playing like a top 5 team with the worst goaltending in the league almost, if not the worst, because the Senators with Allmark have picked it up. Vegas could be arguably the worst goaltending. Like, they're dominating all these chances, and they're not being able to bury them, not being able to save any of the chances. I think the coach kind of got the bad end of the stick there. That's what happens in the sports industry. It's a results-oriented business. I think they could go on a run with Torts. When you change your coach, it refreshes the entire locker room, the goalies, the players, resets everything, starts from scratch. They could go on a run, could win a cup. The last time this was done, it was the Devils, I believe. They switched coaches and they ended up winning the cup that year with this many games left. So we'll see. If it doesn't work, it's going to really blow up in the GM's face. So this takes a lot of balls. Now the pressure's on him. Before, it's always on the coach. Until the GM fires that coach, it's usually the coach is the first one to go. Now the GM's on the hot seat if it doesn't work. Guys like Mitch Marner, Mark Stone, some of the best numbers in the league this year. Jack Eichel hasn't been playing as great lately, but still, they're all dominating minutes. Let me know what you think below of this coaching change, but could go either way. Probably wasn't fully deserved, but I also understand why you change it. This is a must-win season for the team. Thanks for watching.